Yesterday, July 18th, is an anniversary date that you may or may not be aware of. Would you show me the first slide? Starting in 2013, it had been declared that from moving forward, July 18th would be Nelson Mandela Day. Make every day a Nelson Mandela Day. He was born in July 18th, 1916, and someone that people admired, and his theme, free yourself, free others, serve every day. Would you say that with me? Free yourself, free others, serve every day. Free yourself, free others, and serve every day. An incredibly powerful affirmation or mantra. And when I began to think about this, freeing ourselves and freeing others and serve every day, it reminded me of a story that I heard about a grandfather and his grandson. Grandfather had been watching his 4-year-old grandson, took him to the park for a while, and then the grandmother called and said, would you stop by the grocery store and pick up a few things? So after they leave the park, they stop at the grocery store to get a few things, and the grandfather has the little grandson in the cart. And the grandson is not very happy being in the cart in the grocery store, and so he really starts acting out. He starts screaming and trying to pull things off the shelf. And the grandfather is walking and very patiently saying, William, you can do this. William, hang in there. William, we'll be home soon. The child is not fazed. He continues screaming and acting out. The grandfather, William, you can do this. William, hang in there. William, we'll soon be home. The entire time, though, it's quite a struggle and quite a scene. And so when the grandfather and the grandson are checking out, the person behind them says, I couldn't help but notice. He said, you are an amazing, is this your grandson? He said, yes. He said, well, you're quite very patient and amazing. And he looked at the little boy and he said, William, you've got a great grandfather. And the little boy said, my name is Brian. That's William. So say your name out loud. Darlene, I can do this. Everything's going to be okay. We'll be home soon. Free yourself, free others, and serve every day truly does begin with doing the work here first and foremost. And I think in Unity we place a lot of emphasis on that, and rightfully so. And I believe now it's at a place in Unity where we're finding the other half to that, because it really is about freeing yourself, freeing others, and then serving every day, being about some purpose, being on purpose every day. And so today we want to look at the life, the philosophy, the work of one man, Nelson Mandela, and how that may translate to our life. What are things that he applied in his life that we may find useful? First of all, a little bit of history that you may or may not know about him. Again, as I said, he was born July 18th, 1916, in a small South African village. When he was born, his father was a noble counselor to the king of the Mandela clan, the South African clan. And he gave his son the African name Rolihlahla, which means troublemaker. Can you imagine naming your child Troublemaker? At the age of 7, Rolihlahla began his education. In South Africa, it was a British education, and so as the custom, the first day of school in the British school, the African children were given a Christian or a British name, and that's how he was given the name Nelson. He became known as Nelson Mandela rather than Rolihlahla. When he was 12, Nelson's father died, and so Nelson was actually sent to live with the leader of the Tembu people. The tribal king became his guardian at the age of 12. Nelson went to a college. He was actually expelled from college. He went to another college, and then he defied the king, the man that had been raising him, and he ran away to Johannesburg. When he arrived in Johannesburg in 1941 at the age of 23, he encountered a very different African experience. Because in Johannesburg, what he realized, he came face to face with a racially divided South Africa. And for the first time in his life, he began to experience a system of segregation like he had never experienced, called apartheid. The word apartheid literally means a state of being apart. Over the time, he became a prominent figure as one seeking to end apartheid in his country. All black Africans were required to carry a passbook anytime they traveled around. He burned his in an act of defiance. And he began working with the African National Congress, seeking to change this. In 1960, you may remember historically when things escalated, 69 black Africans were killed, unrightly so. It was a peaceful demonstration. And at that point in time, Nelson Mandela went underground to continue his work. In 1962, he left the country for military training and to garner support for the African National Congress. He described himself, he did an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and Nelson Mandela described himself at this time in his life as idealistic, arrogant, and angry. When he returned to South Africa in 1964, he was quickly found and arrested and charged soon after that for treason. He was facing the death penalty. At his trial, he wore tribal dress. He went back to his true, what he believed in. And in a now famous speech, he said in his tribal dress in front of the court, "I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideals of democracy and a free society. If needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." He was fully expecting the death sentence. But at 46 years old, he was convicted of treason with conspiracy to overthrow the government, and he was sentenced to life in prison on Robben Island in South Africa, it would be very similar to the Alcatraz of our time, is where he was sentenced. While in prison, he described his morning routine. He was, every day of his life, seeking to continue to learn and take care of himself. He said that he started every day, he would run in place for 45 minutes. He did 200 sit-ups and 100 fingertip push-ups. He was known throughout his life at different times. He may have been in front of a leader of another country and he would demonstrate how he could still do fingertip push-ups. That's pretty impressive. While he was in prison, his oldest son died. His mother died. Each time he was denied the opportunity to attend the funeral. While he was in prison, he found something. He again talked about this in his book and specifically with an interview with Oprah Winfrey. He said that courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace. And that he realized that if he was going to accomplish this ideal that he held, that his mind would need to become stronger than his emotions. He said, "I cannot indulge my anger. I must have my brain rule my blood." He also read the book Invictus, or the poem by the poet William Ernest Hensley, and this famous last line, the poem is called Invictus, which became the title of a movie. You may have seen that. The last line says, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." He said that line really spoke to him and reminded him of growing up in the tribe where every voice was valued, where there was a different type of respect and leadership. And he never lost sight of that. But he said being in prison he said to understand all is to forgive all. And he wanted everyone to know that he was a man without bitterness. That was the most important thing for him, is to be known as a man without bitterness. He said, being in prison in the best years of your life is a terrible thing, but it allowed me a great gift. It allowed me to change myself. He said it was absolutely essential for him to change himself in order to be willing to really do the work and move forward the ideal which he held so close, which was the idea of having a unified South Africa. He would spend 27 years in prison, and he would come to learn and be characterized as a person who truly embodied mutual respect and dignity. His focus was on the ability to seek reconciliation and not revenge. He talked to everybody that he talked to, he approached it that way. It's about reconciliation and never about revenge. And so on February the 11th, 1990, not really that long ago, at 71 years old, he walked free after 27 years in prison. To his surprise, he was greeted by more than 500,000 supporters. His wife had really been a big champion of keeping him and the message alive. 1 month after his release, he was elected as the African National Congress deputy president. And then in 1993, both Mandela and President F.W. de Klerk, they had been the greatest of enemies, so to speak. They won the Nobel Peace Prize together. It was an incredible act in history to see the two of them standing hand in hand, both working for reconciliation. 1 year later, in 1994, it was the first time that black South Africans could vote. In 1994, it was the first time Nelson Mandela could vote. Thousands of South Africans stood in line for up to 3 days in the sun to exercise their right to vote. And he was elected by a landslide as the president. I think that deserves a hand. He stood before not only his country, but the whole world and said he was in service to one ideal, a unified rainbow nation, and from that, a unified rainbow world. It sounds very much like Dr. King's beloved community and the things that we hold, I hope, dear in our hearts. One of the things when I think about Nelson Mandela, he was a man, if you think about it, any world leader would take his phone call. This young boy who grew up in the remote parts of South Africa, from a prisoner to a president, that anybody in the world, Oprah said that when he was on her show, it's the only time that it ever happened, but every single one of her staff members lined the hallways when he left because every single person wanted to see him. And of all the people that she had come face to face with, she said that moved her deeply that many of her employees were impacted by him, every single one of them. So he was known as a champion of freedom. Times magazine wrote of him, "No one is indispensable, yet history is full of individuals whose absence or presence changed the course of human events and altered the fate of nations. Nelson Mandela's presence changed the course of human events and altered the fate of nations for good." So on July 18th, now considered Nelson Mandela International Day, where people are asked to, for 27 minutes, the years that he spent in prison, for at least 27 minutes to dedicate yourself to being about change. And the motto is free yourself, free others, and serve every day. And so the way I think we begin to do this is going beyond what we believe is possible. That serving every day and focusing on your freedom, free yourself, free others, and serving every day is about going beyond what we believe is possible. How many of you can recall sometime in your life, whether it's like the grandfather who thought, I may never get out of here with this grandchild, but being able to get through something and go beyond something that you didn't think was possible? And seeing who you are, really coming to know yourself through the process. The writer Robert Brault said, "How often in life we complete a task that was beyond the capability of the person we were when we started it." You see, the process of holding on to a great idea or a great vision is who we become in the process. If we're willing to allow ourselves to be changed, and if we're always every day asking ourselves, how have I been changed today? How has this impacted me? Would you give me the second slide? This scripture is found, this is a quote from Nelson Mandela when he says, there's no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of. And then the next is a scripture that comes from Ephesians chapter 20. This is the Message translation that says, with God's power working in us, God can do much, much more than we ask or imagine. We understand God's power is not separate from us, not acting on us, but that the presence and the power of God is a part of us. It is a dimension of our being, and it is our calling it forth when we face situations and circumstances that call for patience, that call for love, that call for forgiveness, that call for whatever you're being called for. When you allow that to come through you, that is allowing the presence and the power of God to be expressed through us. And so, first of all, it's about, as he said, freeing ourselves. As I said earlier, when Nelson Mandela was 23 years old, he defied the king and he left his country. The reason he defied his king is because of an arranged marriage. The king was going to plan an arranged marriage for him, and he didn't want that, so he left the country. I kind of like that story because it tells me that he stood up for what he believed in. He went against, in many ways, the status quo because he stepped out for what he believed in, being able to free himself by doing what he believed was right. You see, freeing ourselves will always cause us to come face to face with how other people think our lives should be lived. How many of you can think about one person who thinks you should be living your life differently than you are? How many of you can think that somebody would say that you're the person that thinks that about them? You think somebody else should be living their life differently. All of us do. I have never forgotten once I saw an interview where a reporter asked Barbara Bush to compare herself to Nancy Reagan. This is when Nancy Reagan, they were going to be leaving office and the Bushes were coming in. And Barbara Bush, when the reporter said, "How would you compare yourself to First Lady Nancy Reagan?" Well, of course, you know, First Lady Nancy Reagan was very petite and well-dressed and always seemed put together. And Barbara Bush just had a whole different appearance and way of approaching things. And Barbara Bush stopped for a moment and she smiled and she said, "Nancy is devoted to her husband, so am I. Nancy has causes she believes in, so do I. Nancy wears a size 3. My leg is a size 3. She didn't miss a beat. She kept on going for the next question. And I thought that was brilliant, that she could have really gotten upset because they were obviously trying to compare her. But she refused to be compared. She stayed focused on what was important to her. And freeing ourselves will require us every day in many, many ways to realize, what do I need to do? What step do I need to take that may be different from what my family or my tribe or my current belief system says? How can I go beyond my current level of thinking? What do I need to do to free myself? And then the second part of that is to free each other. How do we free each other? As I was working and thinking about this talk, I had my example and idea of how to free others. And then, as so often happens, I get to live my talk. My partner, Tia, arrived Friday, finally moving here. And so Friday I said, where do you want to go eat? And she picked this place that has Southern food, and it's close to where the house is in Arden. So we were there, we enjoyed a meal, and I go from time to time, so I've come to know the owners of the place, and they recognize me when I come in, and they came over and we talk. And so just as we're enjoying our meal, and I look over, and it's a small little restaurant, you can see everybody, but this was late on a Friday, so it was pretty crowded. And I saw this couple get up, and the man went to pay, and he had a Confederate flag on the back of his shirt. The people that own the restaurant are black. I don't normally even see color. But in that moment, I got so irritated. Well aware that's me, that's my belief, so I'm not, you believe and do how you feel. But when I saw this white man in a black establishment get up to pay with a Confederate flag on his back, the first thing that crossed my mind was I wanted to go to him and say, "Really? Really?" And then I felt myself getting angry. And then I felt myself, now this is scary, getting disgusted. That's when we're treading in water that's getting dangerous. But I felt all these things. Then I felt myself embarrassed. I was thinking, I hope the owners don't see that. I was taking all of this stuff on, having a meal the whole time, trying to have this meal. And I was thinking, I hope he just gets out and nothing happens and we'll go on about our happy way. Well, it really stuck with me. And then when I got ready to pay, I started to tip really big. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Why do I feel like I need to make up for something that all of this is going on inside of me? So that night, as my custom, when I get ready to go to sleep, I just silently, I review, how has this day impacted me? How have I been changed by this day? And I realized I had a lot of stuff in my body that I was not at peace with this. And I felt guilty about, we all have freedom of this and freedom of that. And I was really torn with this thing. So at night when I'm going through, how have I been changed by this day? And I realize that there's something in me that is not reconciled. I offer it up. I offer it up to the universe and say, I'm talking Sunday about free myself and free others. Help me here. I don't know what to do. Because the first thing we typically do is we'll just hold on to a belief that says, oh, well, I believe this, or oh, well, I believe that, and then we go on with it. But have we really been changed? You see, if we can stay in the discomfort, whatever it is that brings discomfort for you, if we can stay in the discomfort, that's where the healing takes place. As I went to sleep, I didn't have any answer. When I woke up Saturday morning, when I typically wake, the first thing I try to do between that, just as you're waking up, is to drop into that space of gratitude and give thanks for this day. And as I begin to give thanks for this day, the first thing that popped into my mind, I could see that flag on the back of that t-shirt, and there started those feelings again. And I just offered up again. And I heard very clearly in my own being, when I said, what am I supposed to do? I heard, Darlene, you must separate the man from the t-shirt. And when that happened, this incredible release, I was freed. You must separate the man from the t-shirt. You must separate the flag from the person hanging the flag. I may hang a flag that irritates somebody else. We're all in places where we've been the irritator and we've been irritated. And in that particular place, when I heard that, you must separate the man from the t-shirt, even though I know that intellectually, something happened at that moment. I freed myself and I freed that individual. Because I realize we all have different beliefs. We all do things for whatever reason we do. And if I can see the t-shirt, and whether or not I agree, I still have what Nelson Mandela had, that is respect and dignity. How did Nelson Mandela change? Because in the face of people doing things that he didn't agree with, he saw the individual. He was able to separate the message from the messenger. That's the only way. That's the way we're going to find peace. Because you know what? In this very room, we have very different opinions about how we may handle that situation. But if in the midst of that, we can all still agree, I still respect you as the person. It changed everything. I can then still get irritated, but it's not disgusted. You see, when disgust enters, we've labeled it to the person. And how often do we do that to ourselves? Would you give me that song very slowly? Free ourselves, free others, and serve every day. To me, serving every day is about asking that question, how have I been changed? What do I need to do so that I can be of service? And being intentional about it. And when it's all said and done, at the end of every day, can we look in the mirror and say, I like what I see. I'm doing the best I can. Because if I can do the best and hold myself accountable, I can find that place with you as well. And so the last story, when I was thinking about how to do that, I have a good friend that's a hairstylist. And she said one day she got a call from a grandmother who was terrified. She said, I'm babysitting my 3-year-old granddaughter, and she found the scissors. She has cut her hair, and her mother's going to be very upset. You have to do something. The hairstylist said, well, bring her in. I'll see what I can do. this cute little 3-year-old with long blonde hair had whacked off a good piece of it. What are you going to do? So she said, I really can't do it. I can wash it. There's not a lot I can do. Or you're just going to have to grow. And she said, well, will you at least talk to her so she won't do it again? So she sat the little girl in her chair and she talked to her about not using scissors and all of these things. And she had this conversation. And she said, and she looked at the little girl and said, do you understand? And the little girl looked in the mirror and said, me like it. If at the end of every day we can look in the mirror and say, me like it, then I think we're well on our way to being able to look at one another and to set ourselves free as we set others free with mutual respect and dignity. That's what this man taught, is mutual respect and dignity. Every great master teacher has embodied and taught that. So the song we're going to use to anchor this in actually comes from a Chinese proverb. The words to this song says, when there's light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. When there's beauty in the person, there is harmony in the home. When there's harmony in the home, there is order in the nation. When there's order in the nation, there is peace in the world.